Born on the 23rd of January 1898 in Riga, Latvia, Sergei Eisenstein was to become one of the most world-renowned filmmakers of the first half of the 20th century. His father worked in shipbuilding until 1910, when the family moved to St. Petersburg, where his training as an architect and engineer had a great influence on his future filmmaking. Watching the insurgent crowds during the 1917 October Revolution bearing down on the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, Eisenstein foresaw his future. Having decided that the military life was not for him, in 1920 he entered to the so-called Theater of the People in Moscow as an assistant stage designer, and he quickly became a co-director. In Strike, which recounts the repression of a strike by the soldiers of the Tsar, Eisenstein juxtaposed shots of workers being mowed down by machine guns with shots of cattle being butchered in a slaughterhouse. The effect was striking, and that is how the theory of montage was implemented. In 1925, in order to commemorate the revolution of 1905, the Communist Party commissioned the renowned film Potemkin, also called Battleship Potemkin. The film was made in the Black Sea port of Odessa. Originally supposed to be just a part of a huge epic depicting the revolution of 1905, Battleship Potemkin is the story of the mutiny of the crew of the Potemkin in Odessa harbor. The film opens with the crew protesting maggoty meat and the captain ordering the execution of the dissidents. An uprising takes place during which the revolutionary leader is killed. This crewman is taken to the shore to lie in state. When the townspeople gather in the harbor, Tsarist troops appear and march down the steps, breaking up the crowd. A naval squadron is sent to retake the Potemkin, but at the moment when the ships come under range, their crews allow the mutineers to pass through. Not wanting to make a historical drama, Eisenstein used visual texture to give the film a newsreel look so that the viewer feels he is eavesdropping on a thrilling and politically revolutionary story. Eisenstein introduced the technique of showing an action and repeating it again, but from a slightly different angle to demonstrate intensity. He called that the montage of attractions. According to him, an attraction is any aggressive moment, any element that subjects the audience to emotional or psychological influence verified by experience and mathematically calculated to produce specific emotional shocks. The most noted sequence in the film, and perhaps in all film history, is the Odessa steps. The angular shots of marching boots and legs descending the steps are cleverly accentuated with long menacing shadows from a sun at the top of the steps. The pace of the sequence is deliberately varied between the marching soldiers and a few civilians who summon up courage to beg them to stop. The death of a young mother leads to a baby carriage falling down the steps in a sequence that has been copied by Hitchcock in Foreign Correspondent, by Terry Gilliam in Brazil, and Brian De Palma in The Untouchables. Battleship Potemkin has received extremely positive reviews from critics. Since its release, Battleship Potemkin has often been cited as one of the finest propaganda films ever made and considered amongst the greatest films of all time. Being one of the greatest films of the silent era, the Battleship Potemkin is probably one of the first colored films. The director hand-tinted the flag, frame by frame. October, Eisenstein's next film, was dealing with the shifts of power between 1917 February and October revolutions, Lenin's entering the scene, and the struggle of the Bolsheviks with their opponents. After some other controversial works like The General Line and Thunder over Mexico, Eisenstein was able to make a film recounting the medieval epic of Alexander Nevsky, in accordance with Stalin's policy of glorifying Russian heroes. Made in 1938, the film represented the triumph of collectivism. With a score written by famed Russian composer Prokofiev, the film combined images and music into a single rhythmic unity. Continually seeking to expand the filmmaking craft, Eisenstein drew upon his early interest in Japanese kabuki theater and Noh drama and their use of masks in his last film, Ivan the Terrible. During the Second World War, Eisenstein began work on this epic film about the 16th century Tsar Ivan IV, whom Stalin admired. Before he could finish the third part of the film, Eisenstein died a few days after his 50th birthday on February 11, 1948. His political agendas may not have been fulfilled, but his revolutionary advances in film theory and montage will not be long forgotten.